You know, it's a big night when the Illini Inquirer podcast goes three guys here. We're going three deep here on the podcast as Illinois defeats Wisconsin, take down the number 11 team, really holding check. National Player of the Year candidate and Illini's National Player of the Year candidate goes off. I'm Jeremy Werner, Joey Wagner, Derek Piper here with us, and we're Zooming because we wanted to get out of State Farm Center, Joey Wagner and I, to beat any of the bad roads and kind of get home before the next wave of snow comes. But the Illini put an avalanche on Wisconsin tonight, 80-67. Huge win for the Illini and a huge performance for Kofi Cockburn, who goes off for 37 points and 12 rebounds. One of the best performances I've ever seen from anybody in Illini uniform, just dominant. Derek, we kept you home. We didn't want you getting on the roads tonight. What was the view like from the TV, seeing Kofi dominate like that? And Illinois really put together a heck of a defensive performance in the second half as well.
Yeah, Kofi was a cheat code. And I know that we always come back to, can any team, when you look at a team on paper and a matchup, and they do anything with Kofi, and this was something you looked at. Wisconsin, who did go into Mackey and get a win, and Zach Edey gave them problems. Of course, they needed a special night from Johnny Davis, and a big reason why he's a lot of people's front runner for National Player of the Year going into this game. Well, Kofi really made his his case on a national stage, and to be able to get 37 and 12, most points he's ever scored against a high major opponent. And Wisconsin was really just in a tough spot. And when your starting center is 50 pounds lighter than him, and while he is a 7-footer, just not to be able to really do much. I thought Kofi was very aggressive, was dominant, made it a point of emphasis just to be physical and powerful and just be at his peak. And Wisconsin maybe could have tried the early double as soon as he touched it, or even denied catches a little bit better. But of course, that opens you up to shooters. I know Greg Gard in the postgame talked about that, and that is a testament to having Frazier and Grandison and Plummer, and it was good to see Grandison knock down some shots tonight. But yeah, offensively, it was for the most part a pretty darn good, dominant performance, and defensively it was shaky in the early goings, and we can hit on that as we go along. But like you said, with Tyler Wall, who was giving you problems, has 2 points in the second half, and Johnny Davis has to do most of his damage from the free throw line. That's saying quite a bit against a top 15 team, and one where you're squaring up for sole possession in first place in the Big Ten. And credit to Illinois for getting it done.
Yeah, and 6,500 fans were there, which is more than I thought. That filled the lower bowl and the 100 level. Kudos to the fans. Y'all crazy for showing up to this one. The Orange Crush was fantastic. Aaron Henry, the DB's coach, was going crazy. It was a big-time atmosphere despite the horrible weather. But Joey, Kofi, 37 and 12. I think one thing that's really stood out to me is his decision-making. And his patience in the post. He kind of knows where he wants to go, but he's also very patient, kind of lets the defense dig on him. And then the guards got to get out. And as Derek said, you can't just leave Plummer open. You can't just leave Grandison open. You just can't leave Frazier open. It's good roster construction, right? When you surround that big man with a bunch of 3-point shooters, you got to pick your poison. And they went one-on-one with Kofi, and he exploited that.
Yeah, it kind of like Minnesota vibes where they tried to go one-on-one a little bit, and he just ate him. Derek Burson, SID, sent out just these numbers for Kofi, and as you look at them, dude, they're kind of stupid. Like, I mean, they're just really, really good. I mean, most points against Wisconsin since 2013. Most points in Big Ten regulation since 2012 when Brandon Paul had 43 against Ohio State. This is his third 30-10 game of his career. And like, there was a real shot where I thought this guy could actually put up 40 points against a team that's leading the Big Ten conference. That's a top 25 team. That's going to be, I would levy a guess, somewhere in the 5 seed range, or it'd be a hot 5-1. I mean, not like it's going to be a 1, but I mean, this is a really good team. And there was literally nothing. I mean, he had 20 points in the first half. We see it all the time, right? Like, we don't see that performance, but we just see Kofi do these things. And I think at some point, I personally step back and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, 22 and 13, okay. And that's not even normal. And then this, I mean, it's really, I'm actually counting up the numbers, his career against Wisconsin. His numbers are good. And he was asked about that on Tuesday. And he kind of laughed, and he didn't want to say anything to find himself on a bulletin board, even though who cares? I mean, put him on a bulletin board. What's going to happen?
Steven Krause all jacked up because
look out below. But I mean, and he's like, no, I try to do that, go into every game the same. But Greg Gard cannot push this guy out of the Big Ten fast enough. I mean, he has been a major problem for Wisconsin.
Yeah, he's a matchup nightmare. We've talked about it all along. But yeah, I was mentioning to you and Robert Rosenthal after the game, Joe. It's like I just have to appreciate it every time I watch him because this is just legendary stuff we're seeing. On the other side, you had Johnny Davis, Derek Piper, who was legit. I said on the WCI pregame show today, like he is the National Player of the Year frontrunner. He deserves to be that. Kofi is in that conversation. Kofi made a big statement tonight about that. National Player of the Year, Big Ten Player of the Year. Those are the kind of performances head-to-head against Johnny Davis. And Johnny got 22 and 15, right? Like he had an off night shooting, and he still found a way to get 22 and 15. He's so active. He gets to the free throw. I know Illini fans were bothered by that. Maybe he got a couple calls, but it's like that's how he gets some of his points every night. He's a tough matchup. But, man, can't say enough about DeMonte Williams. Checking him all night. I don't know what he shot against DeMonte, but it felt like maybe one shot or two shots he made against DeMonte. Ended up 5 for 19 from the field to get that 22 points. And then Trent Frazier, man, shuts down Brad Davison. 0 of 6 from 3 for Davison. Missed some open ones, but still only had 7 points, 3 of 12 from the field. You got two Big Ten all-defensive team guys right there, in my opinion, Derek, or at least they're in that conversation. The rest of the defense really struggled. Right? I thought Grandison on Wall really struggled, and Plummer, I thought, had a really poor first half defensively. But then once those guys gave you something, and Grandison had a great second half, great performance overall. Thought he's a lot tougher on the glass. But, man, those two just they're off night, right? Like that's what you call them is everybody they play seems to have an off night. And what a huge thing that is for Illinois.
Yeah, I know at first glance, you're going to see 22 and 15 from Johnny Davis and say he had a pretty good night, but he had to work for everything. I know he missed some shots that he normally would have made, some of those pull-up jumpers in the mid-range, and he's efficiency-wise one of the best, if not the best, high major mid-range shooter out there. I know Illinois knows what one of those looks like. They had him last year in Io, but the fact that he did have to get to the line and work for everything says a lot. And DeMonte did not. He did not allow him. I worried about DeMonte with Johnny's quickness. I thought that with Johnny posting up, and that's a big part of his game, he does turnaround jumpers and tries to body up some smaller guards. I didn't think that was going to work against DeMonte. I thought that they would try to put him in some ball screens and really utilize him on the perimeter and force DeMonte to utilize some quickness or really challenge that. And maybe it was going to be Trent Frazier you'd ultimately have to switch on to because of that predicament. But DeMonte was really on him, fairly airtight throughout the game. And really, when you look back at the Purdue game too, like Jaden Ivey similarly did a lot of damage at the free throw line. Outside of that, didn't have a great night shooting the ball. So that was another time that DeMonte guarding a projected lottery pick and being able to make him not be able to have an efficient night from the field. So says a lot about him. And really, like, would you have thought that DeMonte had two really nice, strong drives on Johnny? I thought that if you would have sized him up, who's going to take the other to the rack a little bit more, you'd say it was pretty weighing heavily towards Johnny Davis, and it wasn't in this game. And then Joey said it perfectly with Greg Gard wanting to see Kofi out of this league. Brad Davison wants to see Trent Frazier out of this league. Like, he was scoreless in Champaign last year. He was 1 for 9 in Madison when they met up. And then to go tonight where he was shooting 46% from 3 in Big Ten play, goes 0 for 6 from beyond the arc, 3 for 12 from the field, and nothing easy for him. And for a team that is not very deep in terms of their scoring production, they need a handful of guys, and really 3 of them, and Wall, Davison, and Davis, to carry such a heavy burden. When you get an off night for 2 of them, that's a big burden for Wisconsin, a big reason why they lost by double digits.
And if I could add, Greg Gard said Davison had shot better than 50% on 3-pointers in 10 straight games. And then you meet Trent Frazier. That's tough.
He's got a great case. I mean, they're putting together great cases for Big Ten all-defensive team. And when you have performances like this against teams like this, primetime games, I think that's when these awards a lot of times are really won. And Johnny Davis is probably still going to be the front runner for those awards right now. But when Kofi has these, Frazier has these, Williams, I think that's when Illinois is going to get a lot more attention, right? You win games like this. If you were able to win at Indiana, all of a sudden you're a top 15 team. And then you go to Purdue, if you win that one, you know what I mean? Like all of a sudden, all those accolades that fans have been wanting, the rankings, all the bracketology, that'll start to come. I do want to bring up Jacob Grandison. The last couple of games, Derek, we've mentioned it. He hasn't been shooting the ball well, but also there just hasn't been a lot of energy, confidence from him, and it's translated to other areas of his game. Like you can go through a shooting slump, but DeMonte goes through a shooting slump and he still helps you. Trent Frazier goes through a shooting slump and he still helps you. Grandison today, 14 points, some huge shots, had 2 to go early, and then was just confident from there. Had that great take where he got fouled, helped Illinois, I think, tie the game up at that point. But 7 rebounds, that's what I'm talking about. Like that, they need him to be so much better on the glass. And Tyler Wall was killing him. He had to help defense a lot, and Tyler Wall was just a matchup nightmare in the first half. He only had 2 points in the second half, and I think a lot of that was rebounding. I think a lot of that was Grandison being a little tougher, stood him up one-on-one. But Joey, you asked Jacob after the game about it, and he just decided he wanted to be out of this slump, and he is.
Yeah, and I actually want to point out, like Brad Underwood said similar to what you guys have been talking about, that when he sees some of those shots fall, you start seeing him hit the glass more. And I think Brad said that maybe a little more bite defensively. I mean, it's everything that you guys had talked about. But yeah, I mean, kind of felt silly asking the follow-up, like, how did you decide you were done? But how does somebody just one day be like, all right, that's kind of enough of this? That's what he did. And it changes a lot of the complexion of the offense, right? Because you've got, you surround Kofi. That's the whole goal when you have a Kofi, is to surround him. And then you got Frazier, Plummer. I mean, he suddenly has all these outlet passes, and we saw him utilize that. And I think Grandison does a really good job of feeding the post, which is something we've seen people not named Andre Curbelo struggle to do a little bit. I mean, I think Benjamin Bosmans-Verdonk has done it well, but Grandison had a couple of really nice post feeds, and there was one in particular, maybe you guys remember, he got it into Kofi. Kofi was swarmed. Kofi kicked it back out, and then it took really quickly. Jake got it back into Kofi, and he took it. And you mix that with 14 points and 7 rebounds, and he still is that cool guy out there. I mean, but those shots, man, you're right. When he hits those, and just to decide you're done with the slump. I mean, I've not heard that. I don't know if you guys have, but
you've never done that in your life, Joey? Just said, I'm done with the slump. I'm going to move on.
What do I do that I would get in a slump? Like, yeah, I played a couple of bad games of Madden, so I guess I'm just done doing this. No, I mean, I thought it was fascinating that, I mean, I'm sure there's obviously the mechanics of it and the whole operation there, but like, just to step up and be like, yeah, all right, that's enough. I mean, like, you look at some of those guys, the freshmen, who can look at him and not see somebody spiral after him. He didn't shoot the ball well the last 2 games, and just to step into it against Wisconsin at home and do that, I mean, that's impressive.
All right, I want to pause in this podcast because if you're watching on our YouTube channel, this is a late night Zoom after games, and that means we drink beers during this. So I picked up a 6-pack before I got into town. Had 3 last night, 3 tonight. That's the goal, at least. This is number 1. Joey, what do you got?
The Sierra Nevada. And by the way, Derek and I scoff at a 6-pack at 2 nights in town, buddy. Let me just tell you.
Wait, way too few?
Oh my gosh.
Well, if I were drinking with you, Joey, I'd probably do that. I'd probably have double that in one night. But drinking a 6-pack by myself in one night just doesn't sound that fun. Derek, what do you got?
Yeah, Joey and I have a high tempo, high pace of play when we get together, and you might want one of these. Get them a 30 rack, Busch Light, on brand for my Muhammad brethren, and yeah, it's easy drinking.
I was gonna say,
Derek borrowed them from all the state or the Orange Crushers who Brad Underwood saw with 30 racks in the snow. Derek actually did drive to Champaign. He just swung by to pick up the extra Busch Lights I couldn't get in.
What do our beers say about us? So yeah, Derek, I mean, that's my friends all from Peatone, Illinois. I love to drink their Busch lattes, and that's just you're a man of the people. Is Bud Light, am I just mainstream? Is that what I am?
It's a good go-to, man.
It's just simple, easy, fine.
Yep.
Joey, Sierra Nevada.
Yeah, it's the at-home beer. If I'm just having a few at home.
You're the fanciest of us, apparently.
Well, if we're out, it's Bud Light early and often.
That's right. We'll have to fix that. Maybe you guys are going to Indiana. Maybe one of those Michigan. We do well in Michigan, so maybe Ann Arbor again, based on the last time we went there. All right, let's get back to basketball. What a win, guys! And we haven't talked about this big picture, but to beat Wisconsin, you're one head-to-head. You favorably got them at home. I know we want to focus on who's in first place now, and that matters, of course. But to beat them here, to protect home court, where Illinois has won 10 of their last 11, the one they lost was to Purdue in double overtime in the classic game there. It's huge for Illinois, and I think it's just huge for confidence. And Joey, we talked about it, and I'll throw it to you, Derek. This is a fully healthy team. They didn't use the bench a ton tonight. There's only 8 bench minutes in the second half, but Curbelo came off the bench to give you an offensive boost. I thought in the first half when Frazier and Plummer were struggling, you see what he can do for this offense, even though he can get out of control sometimes. But this is starting to feel like a fully healthy roster, and to kick off this tough stretch with a win, and then you go into the Hoosier State the next two to try and get a win or two at Indiana and at Purdue. What do you think this means for them?
It's a marquee win for sure. And you look at, you have fans wanting to see Illinois climb back even farther back into the top 10 and talking about being a top 2 or 3 seed in the NCAA tournament and everything. This is your opportunity to really build that resume, and it's a prove it stretch for Illinois for sure. And now that you feel like you're fully loaded up with Curbelo coming back and you have your full roster, you have every reason to play up to your potential and really start to click into place. So it's obvious from the Big Ten standings front of it in terms of both teams being tied for the co-lead, and you have Michigan State in there as well, but now you've beaten both of those teams. You're not going to play Wisconsin again, and as you diagrammed earlier in the week, like Wisconsin has a more favorable stretch to finish out Big Ten play, but you are going to have that one up to knock them down a rung to be able to step up and take sole possession. So this is a win you're probably going to look back on when you're the last week and a half of Big Ten play, and you're looking at mapping out the standings and what you have to do, or just kind of how things stand out, and taking care of business at home and before you go to Indiana. And really, I mean, if we want to talk about if you can go to Indiana and Purdue and get wins, you're odds-on favorite. You've really taken a stranglehold of this thing. Even just one win to be able to take care of business at home and then go get one on the road really puts you in a very nice stretch. But yeah, this is the time for Illinois to show how good it is, where you've had these disjointed stretches of injuries or maybe just beating up on some teams you're supposed to beat up on. This was a marquee matchup. I know you were favored by a handful of points, but you did what you had to do and you dominated them. And this was a very good look for Illinois in terms of being back a little bit higher in that national scene.
Joey, and one of my biggest takeaways from this recent 3-game win streak is the defense. You've held Michigan State to 0.93 points per possession. You hold Northwestern to 0.86 points per possession. And then tonight, I know the first half, Wisconsin was going off, but the second half, you pretty much shut them down. 0.97 points per possession. They right now have the second best defense in the Big Ten, DER efficiency during conference play behind Indiana. And then you have the 4th best offense, right? Like that's the kind of balance that can win the Big Ten. But I think the defense is, I think we always knew the offense can be really good, right? Kofi and all these pieces, now Curbelo coming back, but this defense is starting to look like the kind of defense they had last year.
Yeah, it does feel sometimes like Brad's defenses take a little bit to get, not him specifically, I guess, but it's just we've seen over the last few years where it's taken a little bit to really to bite in. I think that he requires just a lot of everybody, but you have 2 heads of the snake in Trenton DeMonte. And I thought Brad made a really good point to your question tonight, Jeremy, is how many teams have a third option who can kill you on quote unquote your weakest perimeter defender, if you want to look at it like that. Purdue does.
Right, Purdue did, but like not many other teams do. I thought that was a great answer because like, all right, teams got to attack Grandison, got to attack Plummer, but that's your 3rd, 4th, 5th option sometimes. And outside of Purdue, there's not many teams that in the Big Ten have that kind of piece, have that 3rd, 4th piece that you're really concerned about.
And I think this coaching staff has done a good job of finding a way to maybe band-aid some of those defensive holes, the way they just rotate people. And then of course you have a 7-footer. I mean, that helps quite a bit, but yeah, I mean, Purdue has some, I think we saw Arizona has some options. but that's just not going to be the case. And then if you do have those options, as you start to get into these one game deals, which is where Illinois wants to be, those options have to be on. So like, I just think you're playing the odds that your top two guys can knock out some perimeter guys, or at least make things really, really difficult. There's going to be guys who just get theirs, but then you have to have your third and fourth guys be on point and have to lift it up. And it just takes one. We saw it last year. It just took one game, and that's the value of Trent and DeMonte. And not to take away what specifically Trent does offensively, but even DeMonte in other ways tonight. But just that really, it's tough to score when you're two. Johnny Davis and Brad Davison don't have those nights very often. Greg Gard did answer one.
8 of 31 together. 8 for 31 between those two. And that's what I asked Brad, was like, when you have those guys who can force those two best players usually in off nights, right? Like Audige and Bowie, off nights. Pete Nance had to carry the load, and they had no one else who could really lift them up, right? Like Ty Berry had a couple threes, and that was it. Nobody else in double figures. Like that's just, it's such a luxury. And then you have Kofi Cockburn back, and he's a plus defensively and on the glass. I think, Derek, this team's really starting to settle in defensively.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a team that took a little while, as Joey was talking about. And I think that you might even see a little bit more of progression as Curbelo works his way back, because he's going to help on the glass. He's a pretty good rebounder from the guard spot, and they do need to clean up, giving up second chance opportunities, way too many tonight. And even here recently through Big Ten play, they've had some moments where they've gotten beaten on the glass. And of course, you don't want to have that come up against Purdue or Indiana, really just on down the road. But yeah, there's a lot to say for having a lockdown defender at Trent. And you can think about potential matchups in the NCAA tournament. I know probably on some people's mind, especially, I forget, was it Jerry Palm that put it out there? If you were to match up with Kentucky and it's Ty Washington and Trent Frazier, that could be fun. And I think that, Trent, his on-ball defense, DeMonte, just his physicality, his just being that gritty veteran, and someone that's now, as we talked about, matched up with some protected lottery picks and has done pretty well for himself. Kofi on the inside. And that is something that last year allowed them to be so consistent, was you don't always have the offense go off. You got to be able to get stops and win some of these ugly games, win some of the high scoring ones. And it's going to vary, but a big reason why they could win 15 to 16 last year is because they had a top 10 in the nation defensive efficiency. And now that they're working back into the top 30, top 25, they're closer into that kind of a range.
Yeah, you mentioned it, to win both ways, kind of like that, right? Like the next two games are perfect examples of this. Indiana wins ugly. They have to, right? They have to win ugly because they just don't have the guard play. Purdue has to win pretty because they don't defend as well. And now they're starting to defend a little bit better during conference play. And hey, I think they could easily win the Big Ten championship here because they're so deep and so good offensively. But Illinois is going to have to win that one, probably scoring a lot of points because Purdue's so good. So that's important. I do want to mention Illinois is getting some depth now. I mean, you bring Andre Curbelo off the bench, just 12 minutes tonight. Brad said he doesn't want to put too much on him right away. The Purdue game, he said, I never planned on playing him that much, but he had to. Didn't play the bench a lot today, but I just think, Derek, moving forward, to have Curbelo, when you have Plummer have an off night or Frazier have an off night, you're bringing in this preseason all Big Ten guy. His minutes are going to go up. I think Curbelo will get more comfortable. He's got to clean up some of the turnovers, but I think that's always going to be part of him. But you saw him carry offensively, 7 points very quickly in the first half there. And then, RJ Melendez, I thought, had some good minutes tonight. The guy Brad Underwood was asked afterwards, like, how do you find your rotation now with everybody healthy? He said, I have no earthly idea. The one guy who's consistently losing minutes here is Coleman Hawkins. And I think it's because the freshmen have just been more consistent on the defensive end, energy-wise, don't turn the ball over. But now you add Curbelo to the mix. It's going to be hard for Brandon Podziemski to play over all these good guards. I know people want more freshmen because they haven't seen it yet. But there's a lot of really good veterans on this team. So how do you see Curbelo coming back? It just gives them a lot more depth than a lot of Big Ten teams.
I'm just going to replay that bounce pass to Kofi in my mind over and over again, because was a sweet pass in the pick and roll. It's so hard to guard. And that's the type of play that opens things up for Kofi, where even if you have a team that is better suited, and there aren't many of them, to be able to stand their ground and guard Kofi when his back is to the basket, maybe doesn't carve out as much space, or maybe they're able to challenge his right hook or whatever might be a little bit better. You put some different guys in space in the to hedge a little bit on Curbelo, and he can just not even look at Kofi and drop that thing off, and good chemistry that they established last year in that. So to see that get going, and then also, Curbelo doesn't even need a screen to get open, can get in the lane because of his quickness, is very crafty with all of his finishes. He's going to be very, very aggressive a lot of times. I think still there's moments, and I fully understand for guys played so few games and hasn't been able to get in a rhythm. I get the sense sometimes he's looking for his own maybe, and he kind of makes it up his mind that I'm going to go get a shot. And look, he's in Purdue, it worked beautifully because you needed that. And some of his mid-range pull-ups and his reverse layups and everything. I think that there are times where you want him to be more focused on open things up for everybody, just making the right read rather than predetermining. But you can just see, even for a guy that hasn't been on the court a whole lot, to just go out there in a limited capacity and do some things that are encouraging. He's going to be a human heart attack at times, but that's just kind of the trade-off. And I think that ultimately it'll be worth it as you allow him to build back into who he is.
Yeah, Joey, and I don't even think that's like different, right? Like, I think he's going to be that player. Like, I think that's who he is. And I think usually the positives outweigh the negatives. I saw somebody said Andy Katz, and I don't often agree with Andy Katz. But he said on the broadcast that, Curbelo takes away from Frazier. I don't agree with that. Like, yeah, maybe sometimes Frazier's not going to have the ball in his hands and he's not going to score as many points. Trent had 7 assists and 1 turnover tonight. Played fantastic defense, shot 10 shots, still got 10 shots, some open threes. I think it's only good for Frazier. I think having Curbelo is only good, takes a huge load off him offensively, and I think it should get him more open shots. So I don't see Curbelo. I still don't buy into this narrative that he negatively impacts him. Certain possessions, sure, but in the long term, this team, I think he's such a huge positive to add this kind of player to a team that's already top 20.
So I'm just trying to find the negatives here as I'm going to lay out this. You're saying it's bad that a guy who gets guys open shots can find a guy who's one of the 3 best shooters on the team. That's bad, I'm to understand. I don't agree with that.
Not to go off, but this is the same guy who said Bryce McGowan's has to win freshman of the year because he's got a bunch of stats, even though Max Christie is the guy. And I guess after tonight, he said Johnny Davis had a great night. I didn't think Johnny Davis had a great night.
I heard him say it.
Yeah, I don't think Johnny Davis had a great night. I mean, he put up numbers, and I think Johnny Davis is really good, but that's an off night for him.
Can we also point out that Trent Frazier subbed out in the first half today, and it was more than 40 minutes of game time. I want to look at the exact numbers. So giving Trent Frazier some time on the bench would also seem to me to be something that is a positive. I mean, I'm probably no expert, but
33 minutes seemed like a season low for him recently.
Yeah, guys, I mean, there's a reason that people were talking about the Andre Curbelo, Kofi Cockburn, and this whole team coming into the year. Like Andre Curbelo, I'm still floored that people are unaware that he makes his team better. That I don't really understand that either. But he's going to get better through the month of February. Like, yeah, he might be a human heart attack at times. Guess what, everybody? You've had 2.5 months to save your heart. Get ready for it. I think he's going to find his way back into the starting lineup at some point. That's just my guess. Maybe I'm wrong, but it just feels like that works. This is good, man. And in the process of this, interesting that actually Brad said it gave them a boost to get full strength, because for the longest time, I remember asking him after Arizona if it had been trying for him, and he said, no, I'm not soft. So I know he was talking more to not us in the room when he said that, but man, in the process of this, you found 3 freshmen you believe can help you in some capacity. Maybe it's not 15 minutes a night, but if it's 3 big minutes in foul trouble, it's a big deal. And
I'll add Bosmans Verdonk to that. Like, Bosmans Verdonk didn't play tonight, but you know, if you put him in for 5 minutes, he can do a job, right? Like, I think that's so valuable.
Agreed. Putting this all whole, it's a tough stretch of the schedule. Like, no one's going to pretend like they're playing St. Francis again and whatever else they roll through the non-conference. But this is going to be a problem, I think. It's now they have to stay healthy. I mean, we probably shouldn't assume that because they're healthy today, they're going to be healthy forever. Obviously, that's the hope if you're them, but it's a big deal to get all these guys back, and you're going to see them start to get to full belief as they get to full strength.
And they shot 7 for 22 from three tonight. Not even great. They shot what from free throw? 9 of 18 from the free throw line tonight. Like they let Wisconsin kind of hang around this game, but defensively they made stops, and 21-7 assist to turnover ratio was just phenomenal. All right, we got like 5 minutes, guys. Derek at Indiana coming up. They ugly things up, and Indiana's rolling a little bit here. They won 5 of 7. I know they don't have a bunch of great wins in there, though they did beat Purdue, of course, and they are almost indestructible at home. They're 13-1 there, and with the fans back, it's harder to win there than when Illinois won there last year when there were no fans. I think it's the best environment in the Big Ten. What do you think of that matchup?
I think Joey and I are not going to enjoy 75 flights of stairs up to our seats, but outside of that, it's super tough place to play. Indiana seems to shoot it better at home, a team that throughout the last 4 or 5 years have not had particularly a great shooting team. So that will certainly play. I mean, when Rob Finney can just decide he's going to go for 25 against Purdue or whatever it was, that was certainly a big development. And also a big moment for Kofi. I think this was as Io described it last year very accurately, like a legacy game. I think that this was one for Kofi tonight. You're going to remember this game, how dominant it was, the gaudy stats. This is a big test where in some of Illinois' other marquee games, at home against Purdue, at home against Arizona, Kofi did not play his best and really was a reason why you lost when you look back on it. So getting Trace Jackson Davis, I know Kofi's played well against, but it's a good shot blocker. It's a good athlete. It's a guy that's had his moments against Kofi at times. It's a big challenge for Kofi to play his very best and to be able to answer the challenge. So also I look at Race Thompson at the 4. Here, it's a broken record, repeat narrative. You got to be able to contain that guy. Don't let him kill you on the glass. Don't let him score a bunch on Grandison, whoever is going to check that matchup. That's something I'm going to watch. But big opportunity again, another quad 1 opportunity, and win this game, and you're sitting pretty.
Yeah, Joe, I was just thinking, you win this game, you feel like you're playing like you just have nothing to lose at Purdue, right? Like that's gonna be a top 15 matchup. You've done what you needed to do to stay atop the Big Ten. But then like it's just like, hey, if we beat Purdue, all of a sudden we might be starting to really inch away from teams here. So we only got about a minute here, Joey, but that would be, if you can win at Indiana, think about what that sets up with Purdue, and then you got Northwestern at home, Rutgers on the road before the stretch run.
I'm thinking about 2 things that sets up at Purdue. Kofi's freshman year, they throttled them. And if I remember right, they kind of talked about how that was big time for them. I'm getting a little bit of vibes in a different way. Like that was kind of like Illinois' back big time. This is kind of like we're still really stinking good, big time win. And I would just like to get the notes that Brad has written down to say to Kofi to get him worked up to play Purdue after the last outing, because I have to imagine his expansive list of things to fire up the big guy for that game, the concussion, namely the foul trouble. I think that's got a lot of Kofi game potential. And I understand the Zach Edey issue there, which I'm sure will also be brought up if I had to guess. But man, these 2 games, so it's a way to, we kind of talked about how after Michigan, the Purdue game and then the Maryland game, like that was a big stretch that just kind of wasn't yet. These 2 games can be that big stretch that is again. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, these are fun, man. This is February. This is where these matchups get so much fun. We saw one of them tonight, and Illinois takes care of business against the number 11 team in the country. Probably the best resume, to be honest with you. Some of the best wins in the country. Take care of business at home. Now you go steal them on the road, right? And Indiana rivalry. Indiana's a good program again. Then at Purdue, this is where it gets so much fun. And Illinois got a chance to kind of set the tone here and set the pace here in the Big Ten. They've certainly done that so far. Derek Piper, Joey Wagner, cheers, boys.
Cheers.
Cheers, fellas. Drink up.
Everybody, hope you had a good time. Whether you went to the game, hopefully you got home safe. You create crazy people driving to that game. But hope you guys had a great time. It was a great atmosphere. And thanks for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Thank you to all of our new subscribers, dozens of new subscribers the last couple of days. We really appreciate that. Check out Derek Piper's recruiting board. I learned a ton, Derek, from that recruiting board. And it's exciting times, right? Just quickly, exciting times for Illinois basketball recruiting.
Yeah, definitely. Kylan Boswell, certainly one that you look at the Champaign native, 5 stars, make a decision here next coming months, and targeting some big guys. Think about life after Kofi, got to get set up there. And
don't want to think about that.
I mean, you don't want to ruin the moment, but at some point you got to recruit for it. So, and just a handful of names that we maybe don't know a whole lot about or didn't a month ago. So tune into that, and I got the full breakdown for you.
Yeah, it was really, really good stuff. Got a lot more football recruiting stuff coming as well. As signing day has passed, we got to talk with Brett Bielema today as well. So a lot more content coming to IlliniInquirer.com. Thank you for listening to the Illini Inquirer podcast. Give us a rating, review wherever you get your podcast. Follow us as well. Everybody take care of each other. Have another great snow day, and we'll talk to you next time on the Illini Inquirer podcast.